All right, guys, this is a topic that excites me. This is one that gets me all pumped up. This is maybe not a fad, maybe it is, but it's a tactic that you can use to ultimately kill big deer, big bucks. I like to use it or use this strategy, hunting this strategy early and late in the season, but ultimately you got to know what that strategy is and how to even have success doing it. And basically what we're going to get at, we're going to talk about how to find buck beds, okay? How to find big buck beds. So there's a whole strategy in which I use to find my buck beds. If you find buck beds, like I said, and you know where that buck bed is, and you know, maybe you can put a trail camera on it, maybe you put a cell camera on it, and you watch when that deer comes in and uses that bed, or you put the trail camera in the transition to where that bed and food source is. You can make sense of this whole situation and ultimately have success killing these deer. But first, you got to be able to find the buck beds. So, how do I go about finding buck beds? Well, it took a lot of time, and it still does. It's not bulletproof, but it is one of my favorite strategies to use. You got to put a lot of time in, a lot of boots on the ground, and I generally start at a food source. Let's say we're in ag country. For me personally, maybe it's a soybean field, maybe it's a food plot, maybe it's a cornfield. I'm gonna walk the exterior of that entire field. What am I looking for? I'm gonna start looking for buck sign. Now, during certain times of the year, you're definitely gonna be able to find scrapes. During certain times of the year, you're not. So let's say we're late season, off season even, scouting, and we're looking for buck beds. What I'm gonna look for is I'm gonna go around the entire perimeter of that food source, and I'm gonna look for rubs. Why am I looking for rubs? The scrapes may or may not be there anymore. You might have snow. The rubs, once they're created, they're there. And even though they might not be using that area right now, you can make sense of maybe them using that area in a different portion of the season. Maybe it was a hot food source early in the season, maybe it was a good soybean field, and it was a super attractive place for these deer to be spending time. And you can still make sense of it because the sign is still there with rubs. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go around the entire exterior of this food source. I'm gonna find the rubs, okay? And somewhere near those rubs, there's probably an exit trail. And I'm gonna start going down those exit trails back into the timber. When I do that, you're either gonna keep seeing sign or you're not gonna keep seeing sign. And one of the pieces of sign that I look for are double-sided rubs. What's a double-sided rub? Now, I've talked about this in a fair amount of videos. But those of you that are unfamiliar with double-sided rubs and the significance of them, is a double-sided rub to me generally means that buck is coming and going from someplace. He's transitioning. He's coming from a food source. This is his trail. This is his exit trail. I really start seeing the double-sided rubs once I get closer to the bed, because as you're getting closer to the bed, the chances of them using a certain trail, once you get closer to it, is higher than if it were to be, farther away from the bed. So once I start seeing rubs that lead me to double-sided rubs, basically I start really slowing it down if I'm in-season hunting or in-season scouting, which is a super important tactic that you guys need to be using as well, in-season scouting as well as off-season scouting. But either way, if you're working your way in and I start seeing double-sided rubs, these double-sided rubs generally mean this buck is coming and going. We're getting close. So if I am in-season scouting, I'm taking it slow now. Now I'm starting to look around. I'm starting to decide, what tree do I get in? Where do I step? Because at that point, I don't want to lay down ground scent in the wrong spot and have that deer bust me before I get a shot at him. If I'm late season scouting or off season scouting, not too worried about that. I'm gonna go in there and just kind of blow out the area, because it's not gonna have a huge impact on my hunting later on. But anyway, I'm taking these trails back from a high traffic area. In this case, I talked about a food source, and I'm following them back until I literally find the bed. Okay, you're gonna probably find a couple buck beds. Just because you found a buck bed with a rub in it doesn't mean it's the big buck bed, guys. It could be a satellite bed. So what is a satellite bed? A satellite bed is a bed that a smaller buck or an inferior deer might use occasionally, okay? It doesn't mean you found the end-all be-all, and sometimes when you're in-season scouting, you gotta push past these satellite beds and push the deer out of them to even get close to the main buck bed, the big buck bed. So as I'm pushing back, I'm paying attention to the sign that are in these beds. Obviously you can tell if it's big sign, and if it is, great, you found it. But maybe it's not, and even if it's not, it still could be in reality that buck's bed, the big buck's bed that you're chasing after. But in case, you know, it's not, you still got to keep pushing back, keep looking for other trails from that spot, pushing back farther into the cover. If you do that and you find absolutely no other buck beds or sign saying, you know, hey, a big buck's here, well, then it probably was that first bed. But you have to double check and you have to keep going farther back. Another goofy way that I like to, and it sounds goofy, but to make sure that you're actually finding beds. Maybe it's not snowy late in the season or off season. You can't actually see that it's a bed. You're pretty sure, you can't really tell for sure. You could literally get down on your hands and knees, guys, and look for the hairs in it. All right, now I can confirm that this is at least a deer bed. And if I look around that bed and maybe it's surrounded by rubs, okay, now we know that we're dealing with a big buck, especially if those rubs are bigger. So it kind of helps. There's a couple different ways to put the puzzle pieces together there. Ultimately, I'm starting at a high traffic area. I talked about a food source. It could be different. It could be a clear cut. You can walk the entire exterior of a clear cut, maybe follow it into the clear cut, or follow it into a different area. Allow the sign to take you to where the buck bed is. And a lot of times, guys, we don't even realize that we're walking past buck beds. We just see a bunch of sign, but really look, because sometimes, you know, you just got to look closer. These buck beds very well, you know, might be there, and we're just walking past them saying, well, that's just the area of high concentration of rubs. And a lot of times that is where the buck bed is. So when you see a high concentration of rubs or any other buck sign, think about it. You know, he might not have been just passing through here. He might actually be bedding here. So that's kind of the strategy that I use, guys. I start at a high concentration area, find the sign, and literally just walk it back. And I allow that sign to lead me to that bed. And it might not be the first bed. It might not be the second bed. It might be the fifth bed. But eventually, hopefully you can make sense of which bed is the big buck bed with the sign that's around it, and go from there. And if you guys can do that, chances are you can set up on that buck early season, late season, in those times of the year in which those deer are super patternable. And if you can figure out that pattern, there's a destination food source, there's a transition area, there's a bed, and you know where all three of them are, well, guys, there's a pretty good chance that you're gonna kill a big buck out of a big buck bed. So if you guys like this information about big bucks, buck bedding, food sources, all this stuff, anything deer, make sure you guys are liking and subscribing, putting out a lot of videos for you guys, so the content's gonna keep coming. Like and subscribe.